Hey guys, Tarek here, and we're back with another manga related video. At the end of my last video, I actually mentioned that I will be potentially going over specific manga series in detail, whether it's like the entire series or a season of it in the anime, etc. Making comparisons or simply just giving a summary of the manga's different arcs. So today we got the Promised Neverland, right? Oh, this is a third volume. But yeah, I got Promised Neverland right here. This is essentially the first season of the anime in its manga version. Actually goes up to the fifth volume, so this is four volumes. Actually goes up to the fifth volume, chapter 35, halfway through chapter 35. But in this case, I decided that I would actually just cover the four right here and then read the last three chapters elsewhere. So yes, that's what we'll be covering now. And let me just say, actually, like 15 minutes ago, just finished reading the last volume, right? And it actually caught by surprise, although I read it before years ago. Like I didn't remember like certain stuff, like how each chapter would have ended. And like I was younger, it was just like 4 years ago. So yeah, I was younger, so I didn't really catch on to certain things until my second reread, and like actually didn't realize the way in which the art could sometimes deceive us. Sometimes the art will give you the different incentive to think something else, or sometimes even just the page turns where they place the different panels and stuff like that will give you the wrong intention, which I believe is such an amazing thing, because there was a point where I was reading and I was like, yeah, I know that this would be coming up now, but when I was actually reading it, I'm like, where is that moment, you know? But then, like, when it's getting there, I was like, oh, all right. The question, like, this last panel ends with a question. Then the next panel, you just see the small details of a person's eyes or different stuff showing that, oh, that's the page turn. I guess that's what they wanted to get from it, you know? Like, they wanted you to be like, okay, this chapter just ended. So, oh, I should probably get a spoiler warning. Yeah, like, well, if you click on this video, you probably expected that, you know, you either know the story already, or you don't mind spoilers, or you just wanted to hear someone else's interpretation of it. So let me just give the summary before I get on with the rest of this video. Season 1 of the Promised Neverland, or also the first 5 volumes, would have like set Promised Neverland in a high tier for many people. Like I'm sure if most persons read this or even watched anime, they would have seen it as, oh, this is one of the potential big hitters coming out from Shonen Jump, right? This is gonna be something that sticks around for years, which it did. Like it's over now for the probably past 2 years, but it was a big hit. Like it did something. It was different, authentic, came with its own idea, took inspiration from prior series, I believe. I'm not sure, but I think I read somewhere or saw somewhere where a person said it gave off the tones of like a Death Note, right? Meaning it's in Shonen Jump, but it's not like fighting like hands to hands, but it was more so like a detective like kind of thing where you had to figure out who was like playing double agents, who was like playing undercover and stuff like that. So it did that real well, especially at least where I read. Like I remember prior that it probably went off rails, like, you know, the setting changed up and there was no longer that incentive to push certain ideas. It was no longer a cat and mouse thing at a point. Like it became, ironically, probably could say, became like two other types of animals that were hunting each other still. But it was no longer a story of, oh, deception after deception, getting one up on someone. You know, there were moments like those still in the future, I believe. But this, at its true and purest way, I would say the beginning of the story was full of a lot of those getting the one up on the next person, trying to make the person play into your hands, trying to be deceptive, you know, and even see under the deceptions that the readers, well, the writer tries to throw at you. This was seen especially earlier on in the case where they were trying to find out who was a potential spy, you know, who was giving their mother the information that was basically ensuring that they were always one step behind, who was ensuring that the stocks, you know, the livestock, which the humans would be, ensuring that people like Emma and Norman would basically remain, and well, Ray would remain like in the darkness, you know, and even if they knew something, they could not really act on it because of that one um, betrayer or that one, traitor, right? Then, like, I believe when I was reading it some years ago back, when I found out that Ray was actually the traitor, I thought that was very creative. I still do. But now I was reading it and I was like, yeah, now I know that Ray was already the traitor. So I was reading it and I was looking at certain stuff. I was like, Ray was always ensuring that he was like leading. But then we're looking at it, we're like, that's kind of his personality, that one, the nonchalant, smart one of the group. They're all smart. The three of them smart actually. But Ray was that one nonchalant, like, oh, he's always quiet, so he's always observant. He's more so, oh, a rational person more than an emotive person. Oh yeah, that's one thing I'm bouncing all over the place. But that's one thing I probably should mention. The three main characters work well off each other. Emma was the optimistic. All three of them smart, so that's a good thing. But they're smart in three different ways. Emma was the emotionally smart one, but she was also Norman is the emotionally smart one. Start in the center. Norman would be like a bit of both of Ray and Emma. Norman was the emotionally smart one. He was also the logically smart one, while Emma was more so just the emotionally smart one on her own. Like she was smart. All of them smart, like book smart, but emotional intelligence. Emma was like mainly that was her thing, while while Ray was like the logically smart type of person. Meaning he goes by the books. He's the okay, I can throw emotions out the door and I'll just be all about the logics. While Emma is like, I must always have my emotion. Logic don't matter that much, but I must always have emotional intelligence. While Norman was in the middle, like okay, he had moments where he felt like a Ray and moments where he felt like a Emma. But also he had his own type of intelligence in it as well, which I would be like would be more so the what they would call street smart in my country. They call it that you're street smart, meaning that you know how to handle situations that are not like textbook wise, that are not formal educational wise and stuff like that. Meaning that Norman knew that okay, no matter what, they all could not. I'm kind of going all over the place. This is like one. No matter what, they could not all escape without a sacrifice. And Norman knew that he was most likely gonna end up being the sacrifice that would help them all to escape. Because Norman was like the person who was able to make Ray have a bit more emotional intelligence, while he was also the type of person who could help Emma to have a bit more logical intelligence. So Norman helped Emma to become a bit more like Ray, and Norman helped tongue twister. Norman helped Ray to become a bit more like Emma, and it actually paid dividend. We know as we see that the 2 months after Norman was killed, um, yeah, I'm trying not to spoil anything for those who might just only see season one. 2 months after Norman was killed, he decided basically ahead of time that this was gonna be their escape plan and that he would be the catalyst for that. So Emma was in on that while Ray was not really in on that. But Norman already knew Ray's plans that Ray was gonna carry it out. Right? So Norman was always like one step ahead of everybody, like ahead of the persons he was working for and ahead of the antagonist, the mom and the sister person. Like yeah, they still show that they are still like 11-year-olds, so no matter how smart they are, no matter how cream of the crop they are, they're gonna always make mistakes, which was seen throughout cases, which I especially love was where they learned from each of the mistakes that they made. So Emma and Norman, when speaking to the sister, basically made the mistake of thinking that only their mouths can cause information to slip out to the enemy, because they knew that once they did not give any evidence to the sister, she could not then reported them or reported the entire plantation for being, you know, basically say okay they disrupt the laws and stuff like that, and the mother would not be removed. But they did not realize that you also have body language as a way of learning persons' intents and stuff like that. So they were like, okay, let's be as careful with our words, but they did not think about their other body features that they probably could not control. So they were like, okay, we will not say this, but while we're not saying that, the sister played into the hand of where she said stuff that she knew would invoke a certain human reaction. So if someone would be like, oh, did you know that at this point someone put this and that in your body at this age? And they mentioned that body part, you would touch that body part to feel for it, like something like this, you know? Like how someone would be like, oh, there's a bump on your shoulder. Person would probably feel for the bump on their shoulder. They would not just be like, oh, someone told me that there was a bump on my shoulder, so I'm gonna just accept it. I will not react and touch it. So when she mentioned that the tracker was behind their ears, although, well, them knowing is what actually gave them away in the sense, meaning that they knew that information prior, but they wanted to act as surprise, but they did not act surprised, so it was evident that they already knew that information. So she was saying if they weren't aware of that information prior, they would have probably touched their ears. And it was not a case where, oh, just a coincidence that they are just not that alert, because there was two of them. So if one didn't do it, the next one probably should have. So in the case where they were trying to outsmart that sister in that scene, probably one of them should have just act like, oh, the next one just be like, not reacting. So she would, in her mind, she would be like, oh, it's just a flinch, or oh, it's just a spur of the moment. Oh, it was an inconsistency. But the fact that both of them did it, they said once is a coincidence, twice is something, and three times is a pattern, something like that. Yeah. But then also, I like the fact that the story was always one step ahead, and they always bring back stuff prior, which is something I think the author actually mentioned on one of the back covers of the volumes. The author basically mentioned that, okay, sometimes we do small things in the background that if you're very attentive, you'll catch on to it. But also, whenever they make that big revelation about something, they always will show panels from like previous chapters and volumes saying, okay, this and that was highlighted and stuff like that. Like, for example, in the case where whenever a mom finds out something and she's like speaking to Ray, they would highlight the moments in which she found out those specific things. Or when the sister found out something, they would highlight those moments where she found out the specific things. Next thing actually, like from the 4 volumes, is that you could have felt that the author, the idea of where things are going. The author knew that, okay, first up, we need to build the world around them, although it's still contained within that one space. So firstly, they built the world in the sense of building the characters. So main focus from the first page, we probably think Emma, just Emma, right? Just Emma. But then by the end of the first chapter, Norman and Emma becomes the main focus because both of them were the ones aware of the main plot of the story. And then after a point, they knew that now it would be linked to the mother when they made the revolution to be like, oh, the mother is one in on everything working with the demons. Then when they came back and Ray asked them the question of, oh, what took place, and they were like, we did not make it in time. At that point, no one knew that Ray was a traitor or anything like that. So he became a part of the story when so basically now Ray became the third person in on everything, especially after the secret was let out to him. So now the character world has expanded to 3 characters, and then it kept on going on like that for a bit of time until then they expanded the characters, especially the protagonist, to the 5 oldest children. So it was now Dan and the girl Gilda, I think is her name. So 5 of them. But then they brought in the sister and stuff like that, while they were still giving hints to like few of the other younger characters. They did not get any prominent roles, but they gave those hints to be like, oh, they might potentially be prominent characters that you should remember the name of. From Phil, I remember Phil because Phil is like the youngest one out of the other set. But yeah, they gave those names and I left them out to be like, okay, they are potentially important to the story as well. Right. This actually paid dividends because by the end of the 4th volume, which was when they started the actual escape, you found out that, oh, all of the kids, well, all of the 4 younger kids after the 5 eldest ones, well, the 4 eldest kids after the 5 eldest ones, so you can say the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th eldest children, eldest, yeah, they were more aware of it because of that one moment where they were speaking to the sister, right? Where we just were like, okay, so Donna and the other girl probably be aware. No, the other kids were listening in as well. So when the escape started, they were actually very important for that role of the escaping plan, which I think is very great because it actually shows that, oh, we are not just looking at a bunch of 30-odd kids and only 5 of them playing a big role. And I think by the end of the escape, Phil also played a big role because Phil was like the one of the few that we like knew up his name directly and stuff like that who actually stayed back on the plantation. That's more so be expanded up in the future, but basically they could not take everybody, and like they needed to ensure that, okay, we know that only from age 6 to up and up they started sending off the kids to get eaten. So it's like, okay, once you're younger than the age of 6, especially if you're like within the ages of 4 and such, they could make you stay back and come back for you eventually, which I think plays a big role because there's actually a time skip in the future of the story. So they knew that there was always that time gap, there's like that time limit. What it reminded me of actually was like in the case of Naruto, where Naruto found out that okay, they're gonna need at least 3 years before, you know, I'm gonna put a spoiler warning, but they're gonna need at, at least 3 years before Orochimaru takes over Sasuke, you know. So it's like okay, I can do training in those 3 years, you know, that time skip. But yeah, so it reminded me of that. So they were planting the seeds for future storylines from that point. They also did a lot of stuff like that when it relates to the system, the setup of the system, which I think persons could have probably figured out from the fact that they were mentioning, oh, there's a mom, there's a sister, and then here they mention the grandma, basically, right? So basically they're showing a hierarchy going down like that, right? And they put emphasis on the fact that the way to go about becoming a mom, right, and also how you become a sister, and highlighting that basically only females that either that were very smart in the system who get recommendation from the mom and who then decides to have a child could potentially become a mom in that system, which I think basically was being like, okay, for you to have a chance to quote unquote live, you basically would have to have back an offspring, right? So you're like replenishing back the livestock that you're not gonna allow them to have in a sense. But there's also the fact that okay, there's some I believe that there's some genetical aspects to like intelligence, and the brain is one of the most important organs where that person is willing to you know, in that case a demon wants the brain. Like they made an emphasis on that when they're like the mother was like rushing to save Ray when the fire took place. She's like she at least can salvage the brain, right? So it's like, okay, smart persons usually make smart kids. That's what I think the author was trying to imply as well, with the fact that they're like, okay, the smartest student or the smartest girl who's old enough would get a recommendation from the mother, who then would have to have a child, then can potentially become a mother. Like that would make sense, you know. So the story had a lot of that as well. What I also liked was the art style. The art style, like it really helped to like bring you from the mindset of thinking, oh, these are just kids, you know. These are not just 11-year-olds. They are just human beings like any of us. Even if we're kids, we're able to understand certain stuff. I think also making the maximum age be 12 years old for the kids was a smart move in the sense that most persons know that becoming, you know, 11 and 12 is like preteen years. That's when you started to get exposure to certain things. And I think in the story, they mentioned that by the age of 11, 12, you have done like 90% of your brain's development. So in that case, that would be like, okay, by that age, they are able to equip or gain certain knowledge and even gain certain amount of experience, especially in the case of like the Ray character, where he mentioned that he could remember some of his like memories from when he was a fetus, which is kind of crazy because of like oh the darkness and the fluids of water. It's like that's crazy. And then after the birth part, they're talking about him remembering that he was separated off into 5 groups and stuff like that. So it was basically saying that Ray was that character who was in the know from the get-go. And they made an emphasis on that as well, where they were like, oh, so Ray was not just living this life for 6 years and planning to escape for 6 years, but he was actually living somewhat in that life for like his entire life and stuff like that, you know. Basically, they were like, oh, Ray is this character who might be mentally messed up from everything that goes on around him, and Ray might be that character who was willing to do stuff that were considered ill-advised or not, you know, something that a mentally healthy person would carry out, which you know we see by the end of the story, he was willing to, you know, off himself. So basically, they were like, okay, he's been in this life for a while, so there must be some scars and you know damage and stuff. No matter how much you might try to hide it, he never had a normal childhood. As he mentioned, he was not one for studying and for books and stuff like that. But the role he had to play, he had to force himself down that line, you know. And so there was like those hints of those stuff, like from the get go, especially when he was talking with Norman. I felt Norman was like that character who basically tested Ray's different way of viewing life. Like Norman and Ray was like, okay, Norman gets why Ray thinks the way that he thinks. But Norman is also like, I also think that way, but I'm still not willing to basically do things the way that you think. I'm more so like, okay, I'll think your way, but I'm also willing to take some of what Emma is doing as well, you know. You cannot deny that Emma makes him a bit hopeful that things can go a certain way, you know. Like at points, even as I look at it, I was like, damn, Norman also has a very dark side if you look at it. There are like some scenes and clips he comes across like a crazy manipulator. He'll be like, oh, I can use this person for that and that person for that while still doing this and that. And I'm like, damn, that's kind of dark for a Norman character. And I'm like, even some of the panels they'll show him doing a smile, and the smile is like, you dead on, you know, it's not sincere. And I'm like, damn, at times Norman felt way colder than Ray because they expected Ray to do certain things, but you would never like expect certain things from Norman. So it's like whenever he does them, it's like more shocking, more impressive. It's kind of the same with Emma as well. Um, Emma is kind of like that in the sense where she's more so emotionally linked to how she thinks and how she does stuff. So I was like, whenever Emma does something like very smart, although she is smart in her own right, it stood out as much. Like she does something that was more so about the emotive and less, well, logic and less emotion. It was also something that stood out, but she was still essentially a character who was driven by her emotions, no matter how you look at it. But the scene that gave me the most chills was when she acted like for 2 months that she was willing to give up on everything, and then Ray came in. I was like, "You didn't give up, right?" And then she was like, and I see her eyes like the glare, the darkness, and she looked depressed, but at the same time she's like smile a bit. She's like, "Nah, I didn't give up." Basically, I was like, "That's so cool." So overall, I would say it was a great set of volumes. Actually, finished it in what I would say almost 2 days. Could have been quicker, but I was like, I did not want to force myself to read it unless I was looking at something that I like. So I was like, let me take my breaks and stuff like that. And I read it like just how I would read any normal volume or books, you know. So it was actually cool to look at. My favorite character is actually Norman. So like, if I didn't know much about the story, like after, I would actually not think that he died. Like I'm looking back now and I'm like, the first time I read it, I didn't even think that he died as well because I was like, there's this one anime rule for some series. It's like if you did not see the character get killed on screen, they are probably alive or they're probably, you know, probably something happened that they're trying to keep them back for in the future, right? Which, well, I know is the case now, but I'm like, the way they did it, like for example, they showed the sister when she was trying to avoid death. They straight up showing that the demon held her up and like, you know, the rose and everything. And for the little girl as well who died, those were the only two characters I think we saw get killed on screen. They showed them like straight up dead, right? They showed them straight up dead, like with the rose and everything. And even for the dreams, like the nightmares that Emma and Norman had, whenever they're showing that person's died, they show the rose directly in their stomach, right? They know that straight up dead. Plus, I think the text box that they use and like the expression and basically what Norman said, the last word was like he said, you know, like who says that before dying? Especially Norman, who already knew what would usually happen to someone who get carried off, you know, because he saw when the girl died, or at least saw her dead body, and also saw the demon. So it's not a case where you should be surprised by seeing them again. Like yes, I get that they're not as, you know, nice to look at and stuff like that for 11-year-old, well, 12-year-old at this point. Well, he was still 11. So it's like, you know, you knew that there was something more to the character. And I also think that if they kill him off there, that would have done a disservice for the series. Although your persons have different thoughts on how they use the character in the future, but yeah. So that was my favorite character. As I mentioned, it was like bringing. So if you did not like how Emma was, like if you did not like how emotional she was and the way she thought about stuff, then you'd be like, okay, Norman was like a calmer version of Emma. While if you did not like how lacking of emotion Ray was, or how logically he was about stuff, then you'd be like, oh, Norman was a more laid back version of Ray in that sense, you know. But I'll still give props to the main character in the sense that whenever she showed her more logical side, it always came with some great benefits. Like the ending of the fourth chapter, I remember turning that page and then I was like, okay, this is the last page now. And you were like, okay, the mother realized that, okay, the place burned down, but the fact that she did not see them, that means that Ray and Emma are still alive and she got excited and everything and that she just would need to capture them, you know, and basically that she could not be moving as quickly, with all those kids and just the two of them. Basically, their plan was gonna be difficult with the three oldest characters still in the frame, but now they're down. One of those characters, and Emma, although she has recovered, is still not 100%. Plus the fact that she actually cut off the entire year to remove the tracking device. That was also to get more time for the rest of the kids to escape, because if she just did deactivate the tracking device, it would not be on the tracker. But she could have cut off her ears and leave it somewhere and deceive the mom that, oh, this was where she was. So yeah, there was a lot of double layers to the way that she was singing, and it actually came back and paid dividends. So also the fact, let me get back to the point where the last volume 4 ended off on Phil was like, mom, basically was like, mom, standing up. Like everyone is now in tune on the entire thing. So the fact that the mom saw the kids, she was like shocked. She was like, damn sure she did not take everybody. But it's as I mentioned, they knew the rules of the plantation, their delivery system and stuff like that. The only exception was when they moved out the time to carry out Norman, right? But that we learned in the future that was for a specific different reason. Because see, the rules that were established weren't disobeyed. They stated that once you reach 12, you're gonna get shipped out. Ray was gonna turn 12 the next day. That was gonna happen. Also, they mentioned that it was like every 2 months a new shipment would be done. So Ray would be the 2 month shipment after Norman. So I've also felt that they could have went another route as well of showing that okay, they knew that once you turn 12 you would get shipped out. Right? So they could have went the route that okay, 2 months before that a shipment would have to be done. But Emma mentioned that she wanted to ensure that everybody got the escape, right? So I was like, okay, they could have knew that someone would have been shipped out eventually, but they just never expected it to be Norman. But I was like, they would not have sacrificed whoever that person would have been even for Norman. So they kind of like, I wouldn't say flop on that front, but I see how that could have been something that the person saw and be like, But yes, overall it was a great read. Definitely would recommend it. I would say I would even take a stretch to say just stick to the manga one, but you can also look at season 1 of the anime if you like animation. Like if you're one of those persons who need to be sold on the manga, just watch season 1, and then when season 1 finished, just go straight for volume 6 of, I think volume 6 is the volume where the anime for season 2 straight up deviated from the source material story. But if you want to just stick to like as season 1 done, you want to go straight to manga, just go to volume 5 chapter 35, the middle of chapter 35, and you'll continue the story right there. Yeah, do not recommend season 2 at all. Like I remember when season 2 was airing weekly, and like the first episode came out, everybody was like, this looks promising, it's still going well. Then I think it was around the third or fourth episode, they were like, the story just started diverging, and my person knew that, oh crap, this is another case of Tokyo Ghoul. Those series are even Full Metal. Well, Full Metal is a good way of doing it, I believe. Full Metal, it was like, oh, we're catching up to the manga, so let's divert and make our own entire story continuing from the first part. So Promised Neverland tried taking that route as well, but they just rushed things. Like I don't get why they did that. Like I cannot comprehend it to this day. But yes, I'll try to do this again to another series. Until then, just keep in touch, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like what I'm doing, you can also drop in the comment section other series that I could look into. Yeah.